All right, let's dive right into this explainer and honestly completely flip how we think about staying alive on a construction site. When we talk about workplace safety, especially in construction, where you're constantly surrounded by moving machinery, electrical hazards, and massive heavy materials, we usually picture a worker decked out in high-vis gear, a hard hat, and steel-toe boots. But today, we're going to challenge a fundamental assumption about that exact image. Now, we all strap on our gear before a shift, right? But it's time we ask a really tough, potentially life-saving question about that armor. Is putting on a hard hat and a pair of gloves actually enough to keep you safe? Well, if you believe that throwing on your personal protective equipment, or PPE, is your primary way to prevent an injury, you might just be walking into a very dangerous false sense of security. Here is the absolutely crucial point. Your personal protective equipment is not some kind of impenetrable magic shield. It is literally your absolute last resort when everything else on the site fails. It doesn't magically remove the hazard from your environment. All it does is sit between you and the danger, frantically attempting to reduce your exposure when things inevitably go wrong. Truly understanding that difference, that's the difference between a safe site and a deadly one.
To break this all down, we're going to quickly cover, first, the last line of defense, second, construction site armor, third, fit, use, and maintenance, fourth, the limitations of PPE, and finally, engineering controls and management.
Okay, let's jump straight into Section 1, the last line of defense.
You've probably seen the hierarchy of hazard control before, but it perfectly proves exactly why PPE sits way down at the very bottom. The ultimate goal is always step 1 elimination, meaning removing the hazard entirely. If you can't do that, you substitute it for something safer. Then you use engineering controls to physically block the hazard, followed by administrative controls like training and rules. And way down at the bottom, step 5, PPE. Because again, PPE only reduces your exposure. It doesn't actually remove the hazard itself.
To put that into perspective, imagine you're cutting concrete. Stopping the toxic dust right at the source using water suppression or a vacuum extraction system, that's true control. That actually tackles the hazard head on. But relying solely on a respirator means that toxic hazard is still swarming all around you, just waiting for the seal on your mask to break. Obviously, the respirator is super important, but it should never, ever be your only line of defense.
Which brings us to Section 2, the construction site armor.
Let's start right at the top with head protection. Your hard hat is actually a highly engineered system, which means any unauthorized modification, a missing chin strap, or even just a faded shell immediately compromises your brain's last defense. It's built to absorb the impact of falling objects or accidental collisions. But if you wear it backwards, unless it's specifically designed for that, or if the internal suspension is damaged, it simply cannot distribute the force of an impact. A faded or brittle shell means the plastic has degraded. Remember, it's not just a hat, it's literally a shock absorber for your skull.
Moving down, we've got eye and face protection. And there is a massive misconception out on the site that a face shield alone keeps your eyes perfectly safe. Nope. A face shield really only stops sparks and light splashes. If you're out there grinding, chipping, or drilling, high-speed fragments can so easily bounce right under that shield. That is exactly why you absolutely must wear goggles underneath the face shield to fully seal out the danger.
Now let's talk about your lungs. Construction sites are packed with invisible killers, right? Things like silica dust from concrete, asbestos fibers, welding fumes, and solvent vapors. If you're handling harsh chemicals or cutting concrete, grabbing just any cheap paper mask won't do a thing. Your respirator filter has to be perfectly matched to the specific toxic threat you're facing. A basic dust mask will do absolutely zero to stop toxic paint fumes. And hey, regardless of the mask, if you don't do a quick fit check before every single use, you are breathing in the hazard.
And then there's this really dangerous myth floating around that one tough pair of leather or cotton gloves is basically all you need for the whole day. No way. In reality, cotton isn't going to stop sharp rebar, and leather won't stop the chemical burn of wet cement alkalis. Hand protection only works if you're using the exact right material for the specific hazard, whether that's certified insulating gloves for electrical work or specific chemical-resistant gloves for hazardous liquids.
Down at ground level, foot protection is huge. Replacing shoes with worn-out grips or damaged toe caps is literally just as critical as tossing out a cracked helmet. Your boots guard against everything from heavy dropped steel to rogue nails waiting to puncture a thin sole. That's why puncture-resistant soles are absolutely non-negotiable in demolition or framing. And if you're pouring wet concrete, standard boots won't cut it at all.
You need proper gumboots to protect yourself against severe chemical burns from the slurry.
Finally, for this section, fall protection. I really want to emphasize this rule. A harness does not prevent a fall unless it's connected properly. It only arrests the fall after it happens. Wearing a full-body harness without achieving 100% tie-off to an approved anchor point is just wearing heavy, uncomfortable suspenders. It does absolutely nothing to save you until gravity has already won the battle, and only then if it's actually hooked up to something solid.
So let's move on to Section 3, Fit, Use, and Maintenance. Here's the thing. Even if you have the right gear, if it's the wrong fit, you might actually be increasing your risk. A loose helmet is totally useless if it falls off right when you lean over a scaffold. Oversized gloves are notorious for getting snagged in rotating drills or saws and literally pulling your hand into the blade. Plus, your different pieces of gear have to play nice together. If the bridge of your respirator lifts your safety goggles and breaks that seal, your PPE is actively creating a new, deadly hazard by letting dust shoot straight into your eyes. Plus, your gear is a literal lifeline, and that means it requires incredibly strict maintenance. You've got to inspect it before every single use. You have to keep it clean because caked-on chemicals eat away at the materials over time. And proper storage is key. Baking a hard hat on the dashboard of your truck in the scorching sun degrades the plastic super fast. Most importantly, any gear involved in a fall arrest or showing even the slightest signs of damage or expiry must be retired instantly. A shock-absorbing lanyard can only save a life exactly once.
This logically leads us right into Section 4, the limitations of PPE.
We have got to face a harsh reality check here. A hard hat is not going to save you from a collapsing structural slab, and a basic respirator won't save you in an oxygen-deficient confined space. PPE does not prevent accidents from happening. A helmet just slightly softens the blow of a falling wrench. Furthermore, if the gear causes severe heat stress, restricts your breathing, or ruins your visibility, human nature kicks in, and workers are just going to take it off. And if it's worn improperly, the protection level instantly drops to 0. Which brings us right back to why preventing the hazard at its source in the first place is so paramount.
Because of those limits, we really need Section 5, Engineering Controls and Management. There is a massive, absolutely fundamental difference between just relying on your gear and actually taking real action on site. Take a fall hazard, for example. Instead of just tossing a worker a harness and crossing your fingers they tie off properly, an engineering control means installing solid guardrails, stable working platforms, or full safety nets. For falling objects, instead of just trusting a plastic helmet, true control is installing tow boards on the scaffolding, setting up debris nets, and creating strict exclusion zones below. Engineering controls change the physical environment so the danger can't even reach you in the first place.
But hey, we still live in the real world, and we definitely still need PPE. So how do we make sure it actually works? Well, ultimately, it's the overarching management system that transforms a pile of plastic and fabric into a true safety control. A construction site has to have a system that assesses hazards, matches the exact right gear to the exact right task, tracks inspections, enforces the safety rules, and critically, listens to worker feedback about comfort and suitability. If the gear is so wildly uncomfortable that workers avoid wearing it, the management system has totally failed. So, let's bring this whole explainer together. The engineering controls might be fully set up, management might have ordered the best stuff, and the equipment might be sitting right there in your hands. But remember, this is your absolute last line of defense. It only works if you actually do your part. So take a really close look at your gear before your next shift and ask yourself, is it the right fit? Is it properly matched to the specific hazard? And are you actually wearing it correctly? Because when those guardrails fail and the dust extraction machine suddenly breaks down, that gear is literally the only thing standing between you and the hazard. So I'll leave you with this. Are you truly protected today?